Welcome back everyone to my channel. My name is Annette and I'm here to help people to develop an independent interpretation of reality and trying to understand together how spirituality is integrated in our everyday life. I'm going straight to the point of the video because this is the second part of the second episode of the series Behind the Papers. So if you haven't watched the first part of this episode, I'll link the video down in the description box so that you can check it out before watching this second part. And if you also would like to see the first video, you can find that as well in my playlist. And it would be great to watch both of them so that you can have like the background of this video and like a general overview of what I'm talking about. We will discuss the samples that we use in quantitative research and two main methods to collect data, being structured interviews and self-administered questionnaires. And if you're interested about knowing more about the topic, please keep watching the video after the intro. First point we touch in this video, in this second part, is about the sample. The sample that we need to select when we want to conduct quantitative research. So the sample is important because it is from there that we can make generalizations about a population, a wider population, because when we conduct research, we cannot ask everyone. So we need to select a number of people, from there conducting our research, and from there drawing our results, and then generalize. In order to generalize results, the best sample we can have is a probability sample. Meaning like a sample that has been chosen randomly, and there are different type of probability sample. For example, the simple random sample, the systematic sample, the stratified random sample, and the multi-stage cluster sample. Without going into the technicalities of these samples, we can say that when we use this type of samples, we collect respondents through a mechanical and mathematical process. So basically there are criteria to meet and calculations to be made, and then from there it selects respondents. So it's not the researcher itself that decides for the respondents, but they collect an amount of people, and then these techniques select the respondents. And another important thing is that respondents are not aware of going to be selected, so they don't know about it. They will be contacted later to whether they want to join or not the research. Another important element to consider when we select a sample is the size, so how many people we are going to select. And it might seem that the more the better, but it's not always like that. It depends on the type of research, characteristics that you are looking for, so it really depends. So there's never like a perfect number of people that you can select. It's just like what you think as a researcher might be the best number to get. And also it depends on the time you have to conduct a research, and thus the number of respondents you can collect, and also the cost. So of course, the more money you have, the bigger the research can be. So when we select a sample, of course, we encounter errors. And they can depend, of course, on, as I said, the size, because maybe it's not appropriate, even if we thought it was. And then the costs and the time, because, of course, the less money we have and the less time we have, the more we need to, go quick in doing research and selecting the respondents. So, of course, we're not making the best selection ever, but we need to stay into a certain frame of time and costs. And the other errors we can encounter is that people might not answer, or answer half of the questions or whatever. And this, of course, leads to a loss of information, leads to maybe making the process of selection again. And of course, doing that all over again, or missing information, missing data, has an impact on the results. So, and having an impact on the results means having less probability to generalize the results to a wider population. So the role that the sample has is fundamental, is priority. We cannot think that our research is going to give us proper results, and especially when it comes to quantitative research results that we want to generalize. It's not possible to select a probability sample, a random sample. We can always use non-probability samples, but they're not recommended because the influence that the researcher has in collecting those type of samples is high. Then, of course, the subjectivity of the researcher will influence the results. So it can be used in case you cannot find anything else, but it's not the best when you want to generalize results. Two types of non-probability samples are the snowball sample and the convenience sample. When it comes to the snowball sample, you first select a small group of respondents that you find in different ways, and then you ask them to go to other people and ask to join the research. Of course, the influence comes from the respondents this time, because they will choose personally which other people would like to join. It's a way to have a bigger sample. And then the other way is the convenience sample, which is when the researcher basically decides the respondents based on the availability. So it's not going to be a random selection, it's just going to be like, oh, I need this type of people, I know these people can join, or we find people that are available and we don't even try to make it random, we just take the first people that can actually join in the research. So now we have discussed sample and how it is better to have a random sample, how it is not always possible, so the options we have, and also the fact that collecting a sample leads to errors anyway, because there are different elements that influence how we can select a sample. So that being said, we can now move on to two different methods that we will discuss when it comes to quantitative research, thus being structured interviews and self-administered questionnaires. Starting from the first method, so structured interviews, we can say that interviewing is a method that is widely used when it comes to research, either being like a qualitative or quantitative research. The difference is that, and we will discuss about interviews being used in qualitative research in the next video. When it comes to quantitative research, interviews are called structured or standard interviews, because in quantitative research, researchers want to ask the same questions to all the people and having like a standard way of conducting these interviews. Indeed, when it comes to structured interviews, questions are prepared in advance, and they will be all the same for all the respondents. They will be administered in the same order with the same words, and all the respondents, of course, will have all the same possible answers. In fact, most of the time they have just a limited number of answers, so that they cannot give an answer that is different from other people, so that the researcher, when collects and elaborates the data, has a standard set of data, so that there's no like influence from the respondents in that sense. So it sounds great for generalization, because then you think, well, we have asked all the same questions to everyone, they had all the same answers, and we did it in a way that did not leave room for error in terms of like asking something different or whatever. But there are still elements that we need to consider. There are preoccupations that we need to consider when we talk about structured interviews, because even though the influence of the interviewer is limited, because he is going to ask the same things to everyone, there is still a certain degree of influence he can have on the interviewees, because the way a researcher is, like its own, body expressions, or whether is a woman or a man, or the age, the position that the researcher has, can influence the way the interviewee answers, because then it might feel, comfortable or uncomfortable with the researcher, and thus influence the responses. And of course, there is also the issue of what is considered to be socially desirable. It means that respondents might not answer as they think, as they would like to answer, but they might answer as they think they are expected to answer. So they might not be giving real responses to the researchers. And the third issue is about the meaning that we have discussed several times in previous videos when we discussed about the meaning that we give to reality or like to measurements or whatever. And it's a thing, because even though we think that by asking the same questions with the same order, giving the same answers, the possible answers, there might be like a standard understanding of what we mean, the respondent might have a different understanding. So if the respondent asks for clarification, then we can, better understanding together and maybe getting to the same level. But if it doesn't happen, the respondent would just interpret the question in its own way and then give its answers. And then, of course, this has an impact on the results. Of course, when it comes to quantitative research, structured interviews are one of the best methods. But still it has errors that we need to consider, and an influence that is present both from the researcher and from the respondents themselves. The second method that is widely used in quantitative research is self-administered questionnaires. It's very similar to the previous one, because with questionnaires and structured questionnaires, we have, for everybody, we have the same questions, the same answers, the same order. But differently from the interviews where there is an interviewer and an interviewee, with questionnaire, it's just the respondents that is present in that moment. When it comes to this type of questionnaires, that can be administered in different ways, either live or by post or by email. This method has, of course, advantages and disadvantages. When it comes to the advantages, is that differently from the previous method, the researcher is not present. So, of course, there is not the influence that the researcher can have on the respondents, being based on the characteristics of the researchers, or based on the fact that the respondents maybe want to give the answers that are more acceptable socially. So the respondents do not feel the pressure of the presence of the interviewer, or in this case the researcher in general, so they might answer more honestly. Other advantages are the fact that it's more cost and time effective, so you can actually maybe administer the questionnaire to more people and that results in a shorter time frame, and so you are quicker into elaborating the data and then prepare a final product. However, there are of course also disadvantages. The first being the fact that, differently from before, the respondent cannot ask for clarification in case he or she does not understand the question or the answers, and of course the respondent is going to give an answer that maybe is not fully reflecting what the respondent was thinking. The other disadvantages are the risk that respondents might not going to answer all the questions because they might get bored if they're not in the presence of someone else, like motivating or forcing them to answer. So that would lead to a loss of data. Or maybe the fact that respondents are not going to answer open questions because, as I said, they might get bored or it's too much time consuming, so they would just skip those questions, again leading to a loss of data. And also the fact that respondents might not follow the logical order that the researcher created, but they might skip, questions and then go back. And this, of course, disrupts the order that the researcher, because in the end, of course, they might going to answer all the questions, but the way you think when you are going to answer and the way you're going to formulate the information is different from when you answer from question 1 to question 10 and from when you answer questions randomly. And it can, of course, influence the results in the end. And another issue is that when you send, for example, things by post, you are never sure who's going to answer for real because you don't see. So it might seem that person A has answered while in reality person B answered. So you never know, and of course this has a huge impact. And it also happens that questionnaires arrive to people that cannot read, or maybe they're not, or maybe they don't have the proper knowledge to answer something. So you don't know maybe the person you're asking these questions. So you're not going to get to what you want because then maybe people would not answer or would just give random answers just because they don't know what else to say. And of course, these advantages or disadvantages can be more or less depending on how you send these questionnaires, being like via email, or you're calling the respondents, or you're sending a letter by post. And of course, for each method, you would have your pro and cons. I've just touched a few of them so that we can reflect on, these side parts of research that actually have a huge impact on the results we find. In this video, we have seen how samples are selected, how we can conduct quantitative research using interviews and questionnaires, and we also went through the errors and the influences that the researcher or the respondents have on the data we collect, and thus how it actually influences the results. So we went through the fact that quantitative research, as well as other types of research, are not as straightforward as they seem, and they are not lacking errors or negative or side effects. Even though, as I said, when we see the final results, not in terms maybe of the papers itself, because of course when you read the full research paper, then there should be all these issues that the researchers encountered. But when you read that in the form of like an article or whatever, then you're going to miss all these elements that are important to bear in mind to understand that behind a piece of information we find there is this whole world that most of the time we are not aware of. And yeah, so I hope really that this video could help you somehow. And if you have any question, please just let me know. As I said also in the first video, I'm going to link in the description box as well with the first video of this second episode. I'm just going quickly through these points. I just want to highlight these side elements that are overlooked most of the time. I didn't want to go into the technicalities of research that much because that's not the point. It doesn't have to be a series on how to conduct research. It has to be a series on how to reflect on research and the information that circulates. So to give you tools and the background information to help you out in understanding what you're reading and having your own opinion of what you're reading based on this and based on what you think. And while there are of course people with a lot of experiences in different fields and they have to be respected for that, you still, unless they are corrupted or whatever, you can still have your opinion. Because when we do research or when we read researches, it seems like they are describing the whole world and it seems like they found the truth, but it's really a tiny part of reality. And I don't know, I think it's not like maybe an easy way to live, because you always have like questions and you're never sure about what you think, what you read or whatever, but that's actually how things are, always uncertain. So you can take a side, because at a certain point you might have to take a side, otherwise you just feel always anxious that maybe you don't know the answer. So maybe you find your answer, but then it's also important to stay open and be like, okay, maybe tomorrow someone else says something different and I maybe go deep and research by myself and I can also change my opinion. But until then, of course, have your own opinion, have your own worldview, discuss with others, but yes, stay open to the new information that can come in your life. With that being said, I hope you will also subscribe to the channel. It would really help me out, and also leave a like if you enjoyed the video, and if you want, also press the notification bell so that you won't miss any other video. And yeah, with that being said, I also remind you that I have an Instagram page. If you want to check it out, I post more often than on YouTube, and I would like that to grow so that we can create a community and discuss about spirituality, reality, or whatever all together. And yeah, I hope to see you in the next video, and enjoy your day. Bye!